Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be answering all of the questions that came through as part of my 15-year anniversary special video that released about a month ago. If you've not had an opportunity to check that video out, I would highly encourage you to do so. I basically go through all of the reasons why I started my channel 15 years ago, reminisce on the old school glorious days of the YouTube gaming community. I clipped together a ton of footage basically celebrating that time, all of the wonderful people I've met along the way, just a lot of really fun things. It's kind of just a trip down memory lane for myself, and I think for a lot of people that have been around the community for quite some time. So check it out if you have not already. It's quite a long video, so grab your popcorn, kick your feet up. It's quite a bit of fun. But in that video, I had a call out to all of you to leave me any questions you might have for a future Q&A special. So that is what we're going to do today. I got plenty of great questions. I've not done any kind of pre-preparation for any of this, so I'll be answering these largely off the cuff, so that should make for a rather interesting and fun video. But if you have any additional questions, certainly leave me a comment down below, and I'll do my best to respond to those here as well. Now, it should go without saying that we're going to be taking our time with this. Going to be more podcast in nature, no major edits, gameplay footage, or anything like that. Truthfully, some of these questions could probably be their own video and podcast topics in and of themselves, so we're going to answer them as thoroughly as I possibly can. But I want to hear from all of you as well. I know you are the ones asking me the questions, but I'd like to hear how you would respond to some of these as well. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into these. First up, we have my good friend Alex, ReturntoMotherBase. He says, why do you schedule these bangers for after I finish my cardio on Saturdays? Please make a fix and provide an update. Well, Alex, why have you not released the podcast episode that I was on recently with you? All right. Once you answer that, I'll answer why I release my videos on Saturdays. But there's no secret sauce, to be honest. When I was recording the Otaku Brothers podcast more regularly with my brother-in-law, Saturdays was when I would typically record with him, and I always try to get the episode out the same day. So there's no real strategy to the release, but I also, looking at the analytics, Saturday, Sunday tends to be the time my audience watches videos on YouTube most. So that's why I release on Saturdays. His second question of 3 is, do you find since becoming a dad, you have more affinity to certain types of games or movies? Like whether it's more emotional, you find you enjoy something more, or even less? Love the question, because since becoming a dad last fall, I really haven't talked much on the channel about my life, how my life has changed, how I balance my hobbies and things like that. And even like on the podcast with my brother-in-law, we really haven't gone too into the weeds of all of that. And so I've been thinking about how I might be able to find a fun way of talking through all of that and that just experience and how it's been so far. But this is a perfect kind of introduction to the topic, so thank you for teeing it up, Alex. And I would say absolutely. I've always kind of tended to be someone who's a bit more sensitive, emotional, vulnerable, and so I think since becoming a father, that's just been kind of like exacerbated even more, to be honest with you. And I remember when my wife was about 5 months pregnant, we went and saw the Lion King like Broadway production that came through our city. And for so much of my life, right, I've watched a film like that where I'm kind of seeing it through the lens of Simba looking up to his father. And when Simba, or when Mufasa talks about, we're not always going to be together. And because Simba asks, like, we're going to be friends forever, we're going to be together forever. And Mufasa kind of does his speech about the great circle of life. And I always kind of saw that from the child's lens. But when we saw the production play, knowing that I was just a few short months away from meeting my daughter, I was beginning to see that now from Mufasa's lens, and how you have to have those difficult discussions with your children, and now you are in the nurturing role as opposed to being looked after and being provided for. You're doing the providing. And so I think to some degree, things like that, I'm just seeing the world through a different lens now than I was previously. And it really kind of has just brought a bit of an exclamation point to those things that already got me kind of emotional I feel like I'm much more sensitive to those things. But kind of taking the question from a different way, am I drawn towards, or do I have more of an affinity for certain things? I would also say absolutely. Like, I was someone for the past 7 years, especially being married to my wife, Lauren, where right before we go to bed, I could watch a really sick, crazy, over-the-top horror movie, or watch 4 or 5 episodes of The Walking Dead and go to bed, no problems at all. Now, I just like things that are kind of much less chaotic, quieter, not as intense, not as anxiety driven. And don't get me wrong, I still love horror movies. I still love Resident Evil and games like that. But I would say that's not my go-to like it once was. And I just, if you know, you know, like if you've been a parent, right? Like those moments, those quieter moments are fewer and far between. All of the chaos, and I would not have it any other way. Being a parent is one of the most special, extraordinary things you could ever experience. But that's not to say it's not hard, and you don't have really difficult days, and you are just kind of like seeking that next moment of reprieve at times, not always. So for me, I would say things that are just a little bit quieter, easier on the mind than I had done previously. And to that end too, and I'll stop rambling on this second question because we have a lot to get through today, I would also say that whether this has anything to do with becoming a father or not, I can't really draw a direct correlation, but I am just so much more nostalgic for the past when it comes to certain consoles. And this really kind of came to fruition with the release of the Switch 2. And, you know, people can kind of throw shade at me about like not playing certain Switch games and not being as balanced a gamer when it comes to the big 3 consoles and playing as much of my Switch library as I probably should have. There's a lot of truth to that. Absolutely. But I will say that like so much of the first party Switch library just doesn't speak to me like the Nintendo 64, the GameCube, and the Nintendo Wii, DS, 3DS did. And I'm just so, I crave those experiences so much more. And I don't know if it's like the color palette of stuff like Mario Odyssey and DK Bonanza is not as appealing to me as something like Mario Galaxy or even 3D World to a certain extent. And for that reason, I ended up ordering the Analog 3D, which is Analog's next big thick console. You can play N64 games, HDMI out to your HD television, and you know, up a resolution up to 4K or whatever. Like that to me is so much more exciting to be able to conveniently access my N64 library versus playing Mario Kart World and DK Bonanza. Like, not to say those are bad games. That is not in any way to say shame on you for buying Switch 2. Buy and play the games you want to play and love. But I just think for me, and I probably could make an entire video on this, I'm just much more interested in exploring those libraries and pulling my Nintendo Wii and 3DS off the shelf than I am playing the next big Nintendo thing. It just does not draw me in as much as it used to. So whether that's related to me being a dad or me just being a grumpy old man and nostalgic about the past, we'll have to figure that out in a future video. And Alex's last question, if you weren't doing a gaming-centered channel, what would it be? And it can't be on the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you hadn't had that caveat in there, Alex, it would undoubtedly be about the Pittsburgh Steelers. People don't really know because I don't go into it too much on YouTube or even on my podcast back in the day. It is a literal obsession for me, and I would say it might even borderline be more of an obsession in love and passion than I have for video games entirely. Like I mean it when I say it's a pretty extreme love when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers and how closely tied I am to the news, podcasts related to the Steelers. So to kind of throw my hat in the ring and have my own voice in that space, I'd love. And I've honestly considered it, to be real with you. So, but if I can't be the Steelers, then it would probably be maybe travel logs. Lauren and I have done a tremendous amount of traveling. I love going to new spaces, trying new foods, meeting new people, learning about different cultures. So I have plenty of footage from New Zealand. I obviously already did the Japan one. I could do one for London and Ireland, and I think that would just be a lot of fun for me. Whether other people would be interested in that would be another thing altogether. So anyways, thank you so much, Alex. We spent 10 minutes answering your questions, so we might need to speed it up for some of these other people. Not gonna lie. All right, next up we have 3 questions from EventualKnits, also known as Leah. And first up, she says, if you could go back to any gaming era for the first time, which would it be and why? Always a fun thing to think about. And this kind of gets into something that her husband, Blink, eventually asked me, but I'm going to ask answer the 2 questions independently of one another. I'd probably say the Super Nintendo era because I didn't grow up with it. I was really first introduced to the NES when I was a very young kid, but my first console was the Nintendo 64. And I think had I grown up during the Super Nintendo era, like if I was born in like between 85 and 89-ish, something like that, and I had the Super Nintendo, I probably would have been introduced to JRPGs and just RPGs in general much earlier. And I think that would have translated to exploring so much more of the PS1 and PS2 libraries than I actually did. Because I've talked about this growing up. I never really understood Final Fantasy VII when I first played it when I was like 7 or 8. It wasn't until Kingdom Hearts that really pushed me over the edge from an RPG side of things. But even that wasn't like opening up the floodgates to, all right, now I have to play Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest and Shadow Hearts and like all this other stuff. So had I grown up with the Super Nintendo playing stuff like Final Fantasy III and Chrono Trigger and Secret of Mana and all these other games, I think that could have really kind of opened up the floodgates for me when it comes to RPGs. Plus, I mean, I just think there's very few consoles that genuinely stand the test of time just because of like quality of life improvements, graphics, maybe the controls. I think the Super Nintendo is arguably one of the best systems when it comes to a library of games that has stood the test of time. Even removing nostalgia, because I have no nostalgic ties to that era, I just think the colors of that 16-bit era, they're timeless. They really, really are. And some of the most groundbreaking, like genre-defining games released during that era, like Super Mario World when it comes to platformers, and Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy III when it comes to RPGs. So that would probably be my answer, but I'd also love to just re-experience the greatness of the PS2 and even the N64 when those consoles released as well. Number 2, what games deserved a sequel but never got one for whatever reason? Now, this is one I probably should have prepped for beforehand because there's a lot of different ways and directions you could go with this. But literally the first game that just came to my mind was Sleeping Dogs, which was, in the era of Grand Theft Auto 4 when everyone was kind of salivating and losing their minds about that game. And personally, I felt like Grand Theft Auto 4, the entire game felt like you were navigating on a skating rink. It just, very sloppy controls. You're just kind of skidding across when you're driving, and even just running, you just feel like, I don't know. It's very bizarre, hard to describe, but Sleeping Dogs nailed it when it came to an open world Grand Theft Auto style of game. Plus it kind of like adopted the Batman Arkham style combat when you were in kind of close quarters with other people, kind of an undercover agent trying to like infiltrate this gang. A lot of fun, a game I've been meaning to go back to. It was kind of ported or remastered to PS4, so I've been really itching to kind of go back to that one because I want to see if it is as good as I remember it being. But that would definitely be one I would point to. Another good one would be, speaking of Rockstar, Bully. I think a Bully sequel would be a good one. I just don't think Rockstar probably would consider it being as profitable as something like Grand Theft Auto, so they're going to continue working on those games. And then lastly, she says, how much gaming do you get in your daily life now, and how do you fit it in around your kiddo? Great question, and something that I'll probably have to revisit and re-answer every 3 to 6 months as my daughter gets older. I would say we were incredibly fortunate, and I cannot emphasize this enough, how well our daughter slept during the day those first 2 months. Like, she kind of had her nights and days mixed up, which kind of led to me being able to just kind of play a lot of video games over the course of my paternity leave. But as she's gotten older, she's starting to go to daycare, and I go in the office. I kind of have a flex schedule where I go in the office 2 days a week. And so that just creates less flexibility for me when it comes to my hobbies. But I would say I still can squeeze in like 30 minutes to an hour most days. Now, once my daughter starts walking and talking, I think that can be further complicated, but we've really locked down our nighttime schedule with her. We're getting her down at a reasonable hour between like 7:30 and 8, and then we'll tend to stay up for another hour and a half to 2 hours. And so it really is, for my wife and I, a balance of, what do we want to do tonight? Do we want to hang out? Do we want to watch a movie? Do we want to play a board game? Do we want to do a puzzle? Or does she want to kind of just go off in a corner and read her books? And do I want to go off in a corner and kind of play my games? And so, we strike that balance and find what works best for us. But I would say you can still find time for pursuing your hobbies. It just becomes a little bit more complicated, and you have to get a little more creative. And there are some days, especially on the weekends, where it's like I might be playing a game for 10 minutes and then I'm running somewhere to change a diaper, hang out with my daughter and give her a bottle, play with her toys. And then I come back to the game and play it for 20 to 30 minutes. And then I go back for a couple hours and do whatever, and then come back and play for 45 minutes. And so it's just very broken up and scattered, which makes like intense story-driven experiences much more complicated to pursue and play or justify playing, just because that experience is really kind of discombobulated and broken up over the course of weeks and months. So, yeah, the joys of being a parent, again, it's amazing, but it just complicates your hobbies a little bit. But Leah, amazing questions. You're an incredible person. Thank you so much for asking 3 great questions. Next up, we have perhaps your better half. I don't know. I'll let you guys decide that. Blinkoom asks a question here. He says, looking back at your YouTube and gaming history, is there anything you feel like you missed? As in, videos you wish you made, games you wish you tried at a different time in your life, or projects you wish you had started. Sometimes it's fun to think back on the roads we didn't take. Thanks for all the great videos, my friend. We'll right back at you, Blink. Thanks for the streams, the podcasts, and the videos. And yeah, this is an interesting question. And I kind of go back to my answer for Leah's first question around like going back to a certain gaming era. Because if I'd grown up with the Super Nintendo, I feel like my love of RPGs would have just continued to grow with each kind of subsequent console generation. And one thing I really missed out on, and this is just, again, my own personal opinion on the whole thing, is the PS1 and especially PS2 era of RPGs. There's just so much that now I get to discover as an adult, but as I just mentioned, like, my time is so much more limited now, and there's just such a wide spectrum of RPGs that I want to play. Like Final Fantasy X, I started earlier this year. I put 30 hours into it. I still haven't finished it yet, but I want to go back to it. Golden Sun, I just recently started as part of a backlog challenge. I haven't finished that yet. And those types of games, like, I just want to be so much more invested and immersed and just blocking out any other distractions. And it's so much harder to mentally get yourself into a place where you want to play those games when you have as much adult responsibilities as you have nowadays. And had I, when I was 10 years old, when I was going to Best Buy and picking up copies of Dragon Quest VIII, I remember this. I remember looking at the box art and saying, someday I'm going to get this game because it looks amazing. It looks like Dragon Ball Z and the manga I was reading at the time. But I never bought the game because I knew the gameplay probably wasn't something I was into at the time when I was playing stuff like Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, and Jak and Daxter. But if I'd grown up in that Super Nintendo era, I think I wouldn't have missed out on so much of those games during that heyday of RPGs, and I would have had the time to play them and fully immerse myself into those experiences. So that's one way of answering it. In terms of like videos I wish I would have made or projects I wish I would have pursued. Not so much, although I wish I would have maybe been a little bit more intentional with finding my niche on YouTube earlier. And whether that was talking more about stuff like 3D platformers or identifying ways to get capture cards and capture footage at an earlier time, something like that, because it's also just much more challenging for me to balance that justification of like, do I put it like 80 hours into making this video, recording gameplay footage and putting it all together only for 50 people to watch it? Again, sometimes you strike gold and it gets in the algorithm and you're the fruits of your labor are kind of rewarded. But had I done that earlier, maybe it would have made it, I guess, the bridge into doing that kind of stuff now with my YouTube channel easier. I don't know. But I wish I would have just found my niche earlier in YouTube, maybe been a bit more focused with the things I was talking about. But at the same time, I look back and I kind of wish I didn't, change anything, because changing my approach would have probably changed my why. And I really like anchoring to my why with YouTube, and that's to meet other like-minded people and have that outlet. So I don't know, maybe with YouTube, I wouldn't have changed my approach, but certainly I wish I would have gotten into RPGs a bit sooner. So thank you for the question, Blank. Really appreciate it. What about you? I'd love to hear your answer to that question. All right, next up, we have a question from Neverbeforeseen. He says, how would you rank the modern Assassin's Creed of Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla, and Shadows if you played enough to speak on it? You probably have already spoken on this, so my apologies if this is redundant, but I'm curious, as someone who hasn't played any of them, maybe an alternative question would be, which would you recommend to a newcomer? Well, Neverbeforeseen, let me just tell you, any excuse I have to talk about Assassin's Creed, I will. And I apologize to everyone else who didn't ask this question, because I could actually talk on this pretty much forever. And I do want to do 2 videos, and I'm in the process of making them. One of them is kind of a series retrospective, my history with it, how when I played Valhalla a couple years ago, it sent me down this crazy rabbit hole of playing all these different Assassin's Creed games. And as part of that video, I'm going to talk about where you should jump in if either you got out of the Assassin's Creed game after the first couple, or you've never played a game and you're looking for recommendations. I'm going to cover all of that in much greater detail with gameplay footage and all that good stuff in a future video, as well as ranking the entirety of the series. So 2 really big videos that are going to take a lot of time, but just to speak to your question specifically of how I would rank the newer open world Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, and Shadows. Origins is at the top. It's my favorite Assassin's Creed game. I think it is the most engaging story. I think it's the best protagonist since Ezio Auditore, who's from the Assassin's Creed 2 trilogy, or Assassin's Creed 2 Brotherhood and Revelations. Just an incredibly immersive world, and part of this is going to have to be based on, like, are there particular historical settings that you have a greater interest in than others? Because for me, I've always had a fascination with ancient Egypt and even Greece to a certain extent. So just exploring those worlds were a dream for me. And I think of the open world games, Origins and Odyssey have the best stories. So Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, and then Shadows is probably how I would rank them, just top to bottom. But I also think Origins is probably the easiest jumping on point because it's the shortest. Still a big open world. There's still some level gating deeper into the game that will be an annoyance to people, but you can get through the story in probably 25 to 30 hours, whereas Valhalla is going to run you like 60, 70, 80 plus, depending on how much side stuff you're doing. And Odyssey is probably closer to like 40, 45. And Shadows, I honestly don't know if I have any intentions of finishing the game because it is just not my cup of tea. Navigation is cumbersome. The voice acting is not very good. I'm not really interested in the story. I'm just not really into Assassin's Creed Shadows, which kills me to say, but unfortunately, it's just not been my cup of tea. And then, what would I recommend to a newcomer? This will be the same answer I have in my future video. If you want to experience the older Assassin's Creed games before they went giant open world, 50 plus hours to beat, play Assassin's Creed Syndicate. It's set during the Industrial Revolution in London, and you're doing quests for like Charles Dickens and all these other people during that era. It's really pretty neat. You're playing as a brother and sister. Parkour, navigating the city is amazing because you have this like little grappling hook. They just recently had a patch for PS5, so it runs at 60 frames per second. A fun platinum to kind of grind out, and just a really refreshing Assassin's Creed game that I was surprised how much I liked. So Syndicate, if you're looking for old school Assassin's Creed. Newer, it remains Assassin's Creed Origins. So if you play any of them Neverbeforeseen, please reach out to me. I'd really, really love to hear your thoughts on all of those games, but stay tuned for those future videos where I will be doing a much deeper dive on all things Assassin's Creed. Next up, we have a question from my mom. So shout out to you, Mom. Thank you for tuning in and being one of my biggest supporters on YouTube. She asks, my favorite video game and what is my most memorable video game? So my favorite kind of goes without saying. I've talked about it quite a bit. That is Kingdom Hearts on the PlayStation 2. There are so many videos I can point to and podcast episodes where you can kind of hear me go on and on about these topics. But I would really point to a video that I recorded late last year called The Most Memorable and Meaningful Games to Me. I talk through 10 games that, if you haven't watched the video, they're probably not 10 games that you would really expect to see, or at least not all of them. Certainly Kingdom Hearts is on there, but many others are not, or many others you probably wouldn't expect. And just, yeah, I share a lot of stories about my past and just how video games can kind of meet you at very specific times in your life and become very memorable and very special things. So check that out if you haven't seen it. But in addition to those games, some of my most memorable gaming experiences have just been pretty much everything that I streamed back in 2020. Journey is one of the most memorable gaming experiences I've ever had in my life. And I'm so thankful that I have that captured on stream. I have it uploaded on this channel. You can go and watch that. Some others are my streams of Donkey Kong Country and Heavy Rain. Both of those VODs are also on my channel here. And it really was just like the community of people that were watching me play those games, the jokes and things that happened along the way. I won't spoil anything. You can go back and watch those streams at your leisure, but those would also be some of my most memorable gaming experiences. All right, next up we have a lot of questions from my forever co-host and brother-in-law, Ryan. But first up here we have, do you find your love for video games to be less, more, or equal to when you started your YouTube journey? Such an interesting question, and I would say my love and passion for video games has remained relatively steady over the course of my life. But back in 2010, when I started my YouTube channel, it was like this just explosion of discovery of things that I had never heard about before, consoles I didn't know much about, genres of games I hadn't explored much. And so it really was just expanding my palette for different genres and types of games that I'd never played before. And it was very communal too, and it just kind of felt endless. Like it just felt like there was no end to the discovery of new things. And so that's what I would say about that era versus now, where I really kind of refined and I'm much more intentional with the types of games I buy because I kind of know what resonates with me. And so it's not so much that my love for games has like faded or lessened. I just feel like I'm more grounded and focused and intentional with how I play, what I play, and when I play. I think, as you become an adult, it kind of forces you to do that. But to some degree, it's almost as if my love and passion for games has increased because while I can't play them as often, I'm still thinking about them as often as I normally would, and when I did back then. So that's what I would say about that. It's a really great question and something I could probably explore to such greater lengths, and would be fun to, talk to someone else about at to a greater degree. But that would probably be my kind of gut answer to that one. So really good question though, Ryan. Really good one. Next up, he says, you go through phases of platinums, platformers, Assassin's Creed, and RPGs. Could Ari Lewis 2011 have predicted how Louis loves to enjoy games now? Well, I'll tell you what, if you showed me a picture, not even a picture, if you just gave me kind of a snapshot montage of a video of where I'd be at in 15 years from when I recorded that Dragon Ball Origins 2 unboxing video way back when, I wouldn't have believed you, and I probably would have told you that is AI generated. That is false. That is not real. Why are you trying to get my hopes up that I'm going to be married to this incredible person and have this beautiful little girl and still be enjoying janky 3D platformers in 2025? My gosh, can life get any sweeter? The answer is no. And, but no, I don't think I could have predicted the journey, right? Like whether it was going through my era in rivalry with Blink when it comes to platinum trophy collecting and, having this ridiculous obsession with Assassin's Creed over the past couple of years. Like, I couldn't have predicted it, but I do think, and keep me honest, audience, that the Rusty you saw 15 years ago is largely the same in terms of like my core love for games and the things that I enjoy, right? Whether it's open world, immersive RPGs, 3D platformers, licensed games, my love for music and video games, like all of those things have been relatively the same, but there's been a lot of other fun things along the way, is how I would answer that. So, great question. Number 3, he says, your unboxing of Dragon Ball Origins 2 popped up on my recommended videos, so I gave it a rewatch. LOL. Made me think of a few more questions I was curious about. Not sure how many total questions you gathered, but feel free to use these on top of my other 2. He actually texted me this when I was out on vacation, so this is great. He said, the gaming landscape has changed a lot in the last 15 years. You've played the big 3, Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony consoles throughout your journey. Who would have 2010, or who would you have chosen in 2010 to be winning the 2025 console wars, console and handheld combined? Are you surprised by the outcome? What's your next 15-year prediction? Okay, there's a whole lot to this question. Let's answer that, the first one. Would you, or who would you in 2010 have chosen to be winning the 2025 console wars? Well, in 2010, things for PlayStation seemed not dire, but like it took them much more time to find their footing than it did for Xbox when it came to the 360. And certainly Nintendo struck gold with the Nintendo Wii and the Nintendo DS. So at that time, if they can maintain some semblance of the momentum that they found and discovered and what they were doing and the audiences they were catering to and what they were just doing for their specific audiences, right? Nintendo, they kind of broke through they broke through the hyper-specific audience and really found success with the mainstream, right? When it came to the Wii, when it came to the DS and stuff like Brain Age, you had grandmas and other people who wouldn't traditionally play video games now playing them. And with the Xbox 360, they kind of just covered the full game gamut. And when it came to connecting with other people, playing games online, like Call of Duty and Halo and all of those types of things, like they were the ones at the forefront of that stuff back then. So my gut reaction would be, as long as Xbox and Nintendo continue doing what they're doing and catering to their specific audiences, they're going to be at the very front of things in 2025. I think the failure of Xbox and what would go on and happen over the course of the next 5 to 6 years needed to be studied. I thought there's no way it can get worse than the Xbox One, that historic E3 with Call of Duty always being online, dogs, and just how much of a meme that presentation would end up becoming, and Connect, and just directionless is how I would describe that time, and just really trying to capitalize on something that they thought people cared about that we didn't, right? It was a complete and utter failure, and then introduce Phil Spencer, and it becomes Game Pass, it becomes acquisitions, it becomes seemingly a turning point for Xbox, and maybe they're heading in a new direction, and they're promising all these new games, and we get teased with stuff like Fable and Everwild and Elder Scrolls 6 and Perfect Dark, and there's a renewed excitement, albeit cautiously optimistic, for where Xbox is headed. And Nintendo, on the other side of the coin, also had a disastrous, like, 2010s, to a certain degree, with the Wii U. They thought they could just shove out, essentially, Wii 2, and it would be okay. And the marketing was awful. They didn't have enough good games. It was just horribly misunderstood of what the Wii U was supposed to be, and it was like a half-baked Switch. So the 2010s were really interesting, and I felt like PlayStation just capitalized on them not knowing what the hell they were doing. And the PlayStation 4, arguably one of the best consoles ever in terms of its library, in terms of what games PlayStation was releasing, year after year, just console exclusives that you couldn't get anywhere else, that were these cinematic type experiences like The Last of Us and Spider-Man and Ghost of Tsushima and Horizon Zero Dawn, and it just seemed like banger after banger. And now we find ourselves in this really interesting time where I feel like Xbox is still completely directionless after the recent news of Perfect Dark being canceled, The Initiative is shut down, Everwild is thrown in the can, and we don't know where Xbox is going next. And truthfully, I think they're not ever going to return to form. They're not ever going to go back to the Xbox we once knew on the OG Xbox days, the Xbox 360 days. I think it's only a matter of time where they're going to find a way to integrate with Steam so you can access that library of games, plus Game Pass. They're getting out of the hardware business as I see it going forward. I think it'll be very much like the Netflix gaming platform. It'll just be Xbox Gaming or Xbox Game Pass, or however they label it, however they market it. It's just going to be an all-digital future for Xbox with a focus on, you know, Call of Duty, Minecraft, and other games like that certainly cater to mainstream audiences, but I just don't think for the folks that are watching this video are going to have any care in the world for the things that Xbox are doing here in 15 years, unfortunately. I think Nintendo will always continue to do what Nintendo does. Lightning in a bottle with the Switch. I think they're catching it again with Switch 2. As long as we see a consistent stream of first-party games that are just as good, if not better, than the original Switch, I think they're going to be fine. And PlayStation, I think, really needs to freaking figure it out when it comes to development cycles, as does the rest of the gaming industry. I just think there's no way these games and the development costs and how long it's taking to make them is sustainable. Nintendo has recently said that they are going to identify ways to make smaller projects, shorter development cycles, so they can continue to retain their talent while still making great games. PlayStation, I think, similarly has to figure that out, because otherwise, when the PlayStation 6 releases here in the next probably 2 to 4 years, you know, inevitably we're going to get Intergalactic, whatever Naughty Dog's next game is, and then it might not be another 7 years before their next game, and I just don't think they're going to be able to sustain hardware sales when software is coming out so infrequently. So that is my very caffeinated rant about the current landscape of video games, what it was like in 2010 versus now, and kind of where I see it going in the future. But that, I mean, that was probably 5 minutes of ranting, so that's a video I can make in and of, or I can make a whole video about that, but I'm curious where other folks are at when it comes to that topic. He says, gaming has evolved a lot over the last 15 years. Is the evolution from unboxings to reactions to streaming a good progression for the community and hobby? That's a complicated question. I think I covered a lot of that in my 15-year video of just how there's less of an emphasis on community and it's more like personal branding and over-the-top TikTok-y type videos that are just so overly stimulating. It's honestly exhausting at times watching some of the videos that come out on YouTube nowadays. I really, really try to strike a balance when I include my gameplay footage and stuff like that and my clips to not be like this TikTok-y, overly stimulating in nature video that people can't watch because it's just too much, right? And so I think in that sense, it's not been a good evolution because I think people's attention spans have gone completely down in the gutter. Like, it's so bad. Like, a personal challenge for you, anyone, if you're watching Netflix, if you're watching a movie, heck, if you're playing a video game and a cutscene queues up or a commercial starts, like, how quick are you to grab your phone and start scrolling on Instagram? Or grab your phone and check your text messages? Or grab your phone and literally do anything? Admittedly, for me, it's often seconds, right? And I think similarly, like, if this video is not captivating enough, I don't draw you in the first 10 seconds. I mean, heck, my viewer retention has already plummeted in this video. I know that. You're a real one if you're still watching this. And so I think that evolution, less about YouTube and the gaming community, that's more us as a society, but I think it has really fractured what the YouTube gaming community and what the videos that were being released were like, and are like nowadays because of a lot of that. So hopefully that makes sense, but I think you can still find really great pocketed communities of people that are, you know, amazing to connect with, and you can find authentic, genuine people still, but you have to look a little bit harder nowadays, is all I'll say. All right, this next question is from Daniel Scott, and he asks, you have an opportunity to take 5 games into the hyperbolic time chamber from Dragon Ball Z. Which 5 games do you choose and why? So I was out in Colorado with my family a couple weeks back when this question came through, and literally for like the next 2 days, I'm just thinking about not the hyperbolic time chamber from DBZ, or at least not in the way it was intended. I was thinking like time machine. Like, I go into a time machine and I can take 5 games into the future, like 100 years. And from a game preservation standpoint, what games would I select? So I was thinking like, well, you probably have to take Tetris and maybe Zelda and maybe something like Dark Souls or whatever. But then I kind of snapped out of it and I was like, no, wait a second. The hyperbolic time chamber was used because time in the chamber slowed down versus the outside world. So like, an hour in the chamber is like a second out in the real world. And so then my mindset shifted of like, okay, well, no, wait a second. If that is the case, then the games I would take would be games that at this stage of my life, traditionally, I wouldn't want to play because they're just too long and I don't have the time to play them. And so that is the angle I'm taking. This is actually the only question that I prepared answers for, just because I didn't want to be spinning my wheels here forever. And so my 5 games. First up, World of Warcraft. I've never played it. I've never really gotten into MMOs much, and this would give me the opportunity to kind of just play that as much as I wanted to with no real world impact, no real world neglect of my adult responsibilities, I guess I would say. And next up, Final Fantasy XIV. And this has been an MMO that I have been wanting to play for years. I still think it's likely at some point that I'll give it a try. I know people say like, no, Rusty, once you dip your toe, like you're in forever. I have pretty good self-control when it comes to gaming. Like, I'm not one that is going to go like absolutely nuts when it comes to an MMO or really any game for that matter. Except Assassin's Creed, but we don't talk about that around here. Final Fantasy XIV, I think, would be a lot of fun. I really want to experience the story. Masayoshi Soken, I've listened to so much of the 14 soundtrack, and to have context to where those themes actually come from would be amazing. So Final Fantasy XIV would be my second choice. Persona 4. I've never played a Persona game, at least not to completion. I've dabbled in like, I think Persona 2 Innocent Sin on the PSP. I played a little bit back in the day, but I think 4 would be really up my alley. And with the remake coming whenever it's coming, that might be my jumping on point. Hyperbolic Time Chamber aside, I just want to play a Persona game. So Persona 4 would be my pick. Yakuza 0 or Yakuza Like a Dragon. Another series I've been meaning to get into. There's like 1 billion games and they're like 2 billion hours long. So I want to play them so badly. And I put like 10 hours into Yakuza 0 and I still have like 50 hours left. So, and those are games that, earlier in the video, I talked about my gaming being very jumbled and broken up with having a little one. And those are not games that you want to play for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and keep coming back to, because you're reading subtitles, you're really just locked into the game. I mean, at times it's almost more visual novel than it is beat 'em up action video game. You know what I mean? So the hyperbolic time chamber would give me the opportunity to be fully immersed in the Yakuza experience. And then last, but certainly not least, I think most people would come after me with pitchforks and fire if I didn't select this. We're finally gonna play The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but only if someone can build me a hyperbolic time chamber. Until that happens, Breath of the Wild will remain on the shelf. But Daniel, thank you for the question. Love it. And I would really like to hear other people's picks for that. Yeah, you can go down a rabbit hole with that, but very fun question. Next up, we have 3 questions from my good friend, Zach Archer. The first up is, what video game world would you most like to live in if you had to choose one? I think it's so hard not to just select Pokemon. And of all the other video games, I'm going to take a quick look around the shelves here. Like, how could you not select Pokemon? I just think that's such an easy answer. And yeah, just recreate the Ash Ketchum experience, trying to become the best there ever was, catching them all. And yeah, you can make a whole video talking about who your party would be, but we're not going to do that today. Pokemon would be my selection. He goes on, what is one property that you think would have made for a great licensed game that was never made into one? Zach and I share a mutual love and interest in licensed video games. I would say 2 things. One definitely doesn't have a video game associated with it, and that is the movie Inception. I think it'd be really fascinating to like almost blend a little bit of the game mechanics of something like Control, because as I understand it, there's kind of like time manipulation and things like that. It is kind of Inception-y in nature with its storytelling. And I was just getting a call from my wife, so I had to take a quick break. But yes, I think Inception, from a movie to game perspective, you have Control like gameplay mechanics, maybe mixing that a little bit with like Dishonored stealth and like player choice on whether or not you're killing people or leaving people be. I just think that could be an interesting take on the Inception story, even if you're using different characters, and just kind of using that the plot device and kind of what goes into that movie would be neat. The other thing, I'll kind of break the question a little bit, or go against what he's asking, is Lost. There is already a Lost video game. It is very bad. It is not good at all. And it takes place, I think, between like seasons 2 and 3. I think what could have been really cool is if Telltale Games, who did The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, The Wolf Among Us, things like that, if you could have gone through like the entirety of the events of the Lost story, all 6 seasons, but made decisions that potentially altered the overall outcome, would be fascinating. And, fast forward maybe 30 seconds if you've never seen Lost, but I would envision it like when Boone and Locke are kind of going out throughout the forest, and they eventually discover the hatch, but before that, or maybe after that, they discover the plane and the tree. Maybe you can make a decision as the player to determine who goes up in that tree. Is it Boone or is it Locke? And then the fate of that character remains the same as it was depicted in the show. But then how much of a butterfly effect would that have? Because Locke is obviously a very critical character of the story. How does that affect future events and other plot points? To be able to do that and then compare the things that you do with other people in the same way that you can do in The Walking Dead and some of those other Telltale games, that would be pretty cool. So I would say that. Make a good Lost video game, please. Whether it be movie, show, or anything really, is there a genre of video games that you'd like to try out more than you have already? I would say on the video game side of things, it would be kind of that like cozy uh, farming sim genre. And I actually have the perfect game for it. It is Disney Dreamlight Valley, which is essentially Animal Crossing with Disney characters. My wife, that was like her game of the year when it originally came out. She put dozens, if not well over 100 hours into that game. I'm playing it on PS5 and I have the Portal and I'm really enjoying my time. It is the perfect game to come down from like a long day of work and just relax, clean up your house, just do quests with, you know, your favorite Disney characters. It's a pretty good time. So I would say that. Movies, TV, I would say not so much. I think when it comes to movies, just some classic films that maybe I haven't seen from like the 80s, 90s, or even well before that. Like I've never seen Casablanca, like just classic films, probably that. TV show, there's a lot of TV shows that I haven't seen as well. Like I've never seen The Sopranos, so that would be one I'd want to kind of course correct and make sure I watch that. But again, it's going back to the age-old question of like, you only have so much time in a day, and adult responsibilities continue to increase. So making time and finding time to do those things is few and far between. And chances are, if I do have free time, and I'm obviously not hanging out with my wife, my family, my friends, then I'm most likely just playing video games. But that would be my answer. Excellent question, Zach. Thank you so much. Last, but certainly not least, we have 4 really good questions from my wife, Lauren. So Lauren, shout outs to you. You're the best. Here we go. Question number 1. What pivotal moments or turning points have shaped the direction of your YouTube channel over the last 15 years? That's an interesting question. And, you know, it kind of goes into a lot of the things I shared in my 15-year anniversary video. And I think some of the things that I talked about in my response to Blink's question, like what I have done things differently. And again, I kind of stand by maybe not so much otherwise, like just finding more of a specific niche, being more focused and targeted with the types of videos I was making and how I was going about making them. But just in terms of like turning points, going to college was a big one. And you see the frequency of my videos kind of going down when I'm in college, but I'm so thankful that I did end up recording those videos. I didn't mention this in the video, but that dorm room that I recorded several videos in has since been demolished. So to have a literal like video time capsule of me being in that room is so amazing. And I'm so thankful I have it because it is no longer there literally. You know what I mean? And so just the frequency went down when I was in college. And then certainly when I was studying for like the CPA exam and getting married, I really wasn't doing videos at all. And so that was kind of a major turning point. And then when I came back after that, I passed the CPA, Lauren and I got married, and that passion for talking about games was continuing to kind of resurface. When I came back to YouTube, it was just not what it once was. And that was when I really kind of learned that, okay, the YouTube gaming community isn't what it once was. You have this weird algorithm where you never know if people are even going to be able to discover your videos. Let's shake things up a little bit and let's do 150 episodes of a podcast, which is what I did with my brother-in-law. So those were kind of all the major turning points. And then Ryan and I, since we've kind of been on that indefinite hiatus, I've come back to YouTube. So those would kind of be the major turning points. Next up, she says, what lessons have you learned throughout your time on YouTube, and what has kept you motivated to continue making videos over the years? This is a great question, and it's a very timely one because Daniel Scott, someone who I just answered his question earlier, he just had this long string of tweets on Twitter last night because he records an audio-only video game show on Spotify and wherever you can find gaming podcasts. And it was him really talking about, I think I'm going to step away from this. I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know if this is worth the time, the investment. And he had a lot of reasonings for that. And Daniel, I need to get back to you on Discord because we've kind of been going back and forth, but consider this a bit of a response to that. I think it's so important for someone to really define for themselves and anchor to what your why is. Like WHY, your why for doing things in life, like even outside of the context of YouTube. Because if you don't have that defined and you're not anchored to that, it's really easy to just waver. And I know people that have said, I'm running a marathon this fall. And it's like, really? Like you hate running. You've never run. Why are you running? I don't know. I kind of want to check the box. And after a while, those people don't continue training and they don't end up running the marathon. And it's not about like telling you don't do that thing that you might want to check a box for, you might be passionate about, but I just think it's really easy to not be disciplined or lose sight of doing the thing you want if you don't have a really well-defined reason behind it. And so, and I promise I'm going to tie a bow on all of this and getting back to Lauren's question of like, what have you learned throughout your journey, is I've wavered personally, because whether it was the podcast my brother-in-law and I were doing, or some of my YouTube videos that never really reach broader audiences and they don't get thousands of views or, tons of thumbs up or lots of comments and engagement with people, it's very easy to get into a cycle mentally of this is not worth my time because I'm not getting the clicks I expect to get given the investment in time I'm putting into these videos, right? But thankfully, I have my wife to remind me and ground me that, Rusty, you came down after recording that video and you were on cloud 9. You were so excited. You were so passionate and happy with how it turned out and how well you articulated your thoughts. And then you put the video up on Saturday and it's, the bad gray thumbs downs of basically like the engagement isn't strong. It's not the viewership you expected. The impression rate isn't good or whatever. And then I really second guess everything because I forget why I'm doing this. And my why is because, one, I genuinely need an outlet to talk about games, whether that's here, it's podcasting, it's with friends that have the same love and passion that I have for it. And it's also to engage with other people. And if I can check those two boxes consistently and effectively, then that should theoretically be enough for me. And I know that's incredibly reductive in simplifying something that's probably far more nuanced and complex. And I don't like using this word, but if you are a content creator, I think you can relate to that to some degree. I think everyone at some point asks themselves the question, should I continue to do this? Is this still worth my time? Am I getting out of this what I expect to get out of it? And for me, I think it's just important to anchor to that why and understand that even if my why remains largely the same, how often I do it can fluctuate and ebb and flow, right? I don't need to release a video every week or every 2 weeks or even every month. Maybe it's 4 times a year I release a video. Maybe it's every time around December I release my Game of the Year video because I want to have that documentation for myself of what my favorite 10 games were in any given year, right? And so for me, in terms of lessons learned, it really is just reminding myself that this is not life or death. I started doing this for fun. I'm continuing to do it for fun. And if I can make a little bit of money along the way, that's great. But that's not the reason why I am doing this. Because if it was, I think I would lose steam. I would lose interest. And honestly, I'd probably lose respect from other people because I would go about these videos a much different way to play the game and play the system. And that's not to say that I don't respect the hustle of other people doing it and maybe changing and adapting and playing the game a little bit. I'm sorry, you have to play the game a little bit if you're on YouTube and you want to get a consistent viewership. But I think it's very easy to get consumed by it. And so I think just grounding yourself, having a good support system is important when it comes to stepping into the YouTube, Twitch streaming, and podcasting space. So hopefully some part of that ramble made sense. But that is going to end up being my advice for Daniel. And that's kind of one of the strongest lessons I've learned for myself when stepping into this whole podcasting and YouTube journey over the past 15 years. Number 3, what do you hope that our daughter learns from your engagement on YouTube and your love of games? So I would kind of just amplify everything I just said, right? When it comes to whatever our daughter wants to do in life, career-wise, anything really, her passions, her hobbies, her interests, like, not that she has to have this like super defined thesis statement of a why for everything she does. That's not the point I'm making, but I just want her to not be so easily influenced by a world in society that today I think is, because of the use of social media and just how much noise and stuff is out there. It's just so easy to be just consumed by that and just to kind of like go along with what everyone else is saying and doing. And I think it's just really easy to be consumed by all that. And so my hope is that she can look back on my history on YouTube and she can see how passionately I speak about this thing that I love, and how much my personality, my authenticity, how genuine I hope I come across these past 15 years, that resonates for her and it inspires her to do something similar in her life. Whatever that is, whatever she takes an interest in, that would be one of the biggest things that I hope she learns from my engagement with YouTube. And the other, kind of on a similar train of thought, is to just do your best to not allow the negativity to take a hold of you, right? And I think if you have a strong enough support system, if you see certain personality types in people modeling and living their life in a certain way, when someone makes a negative comment or tries to get you to go down a different path or a certain path that maybe you wouldn't otherwise go down, then it's easier for you to like, no, that's not me. I'm grounded in these ideals and these morals and these things, right? That's not me. I'm not going to allow this one naysayer on the internet who's screaming at me about my, I had a person recently calling out my hairline. I'm sorry. All right. I don't have the best genetics. This is what it is. We're doing our best out here. And that's all it is, right? Just quiet the noise. Don't buy into it. People are miserable and they like to put other people down because they have nothing else better to do with their lives. And I honestly feel sorry for them, you know, but we're not going to buy into that nonsense. Not around here. Not around the Louie YouTube channel. And neither should you. Neither should you. Quiet the noise. Ignore the haters. Last, but certainly not least, Lauren asks, what's the first game you would like to introduce to kids? Well, this is a complicated question, but a very fun one. And I think something very simple, something with a simple graphical style that our daughter, hopefully our future kids, can just really pick up and play and just poke around and just enjoy exploring. And for me, that would be stuff like Spyro the Dragon. I think something that has kind of a PBS Kids, early Nickelodeon energy to it with its characters and how they talk and the graphical style, and just her wandering around those worlds with those ambient tunes playing, I think would be amazing. It's also hard not to point to something like the original Super Mario Brothers because it's just so simple. You're just going left to right, jumping over these Goombas, and just the progression of learning how to play that game, I think can really kind of equip you for other games, and just movement of character and what the game is teaching you to do and how to play it, I think can translate well to other games. So those would be two big ones. But eventually stuff like Diddy Kong Racing and Mario Kart, I think would just be a lot of fun to play with a little one. But oh my goodness, this video went on far longer than I ever could have anticipated. If you asked me a question, hopefully you are satisfied with all of my responses. I was very rambly today, so hopefully at least 10% of my responses made some kind of coherent sense. But I'd love to hear from all of you down in the comment section below. Feel free to answer like any or all of these questions. So many of them could have been their own video topic, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if I go back and revisit some of these questions in future video topics, because there were just so many good ones. So thank you so much for asking all the questions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.